Thank you so much. I brought two projects that is mainly about densifying the city, and one project is a mixed-use project in a small sort of architectural scale, and the second one is a project that we just released, which is a rather large-scale mixed-use project, IKEA in Copenhagen city center, together with hotel and youth housing. So, but both is about densifying and the necessity of mixing functions. If you want an area to function sort of mentally, you also need to mix the functions, but also because the sites are so much in favor, you could say. Everybody wants to build inside Copenhagen, Aarhus, Aalborg, Malmö probably, and Stockholm. So what you need to do is to think differently, and you need to be a little bit inventive and try to get all functions to work together. This is it's actually a photograph, it's not a render, it does look a little bit renderish. But it's a literal mixed-use project in Amager, Copenhagen. It's a supermarket in the bottom, it's a sports hall on the second floor, and housing on top. And the idea here is we have this rather small site, and the Copenhagen municipality needed a sports hall, and to finance that, they asked private developers to build the sports hall, and then you can see whatever you can get out of the rest of the site, of the buildability of the site. So the smart thing here is that what we did was to use the construction of the sports hall, which is the big beams going across the 25 meters that you need to span. And instead of just having these beams inside the room, we had them on top. And in between the beams, we did these very long row houses or courtyard houses. And since you cannot break in between the beams, because then they're not working as a construction anymore, we needed to enter from one end, and we needed to create daylight in the middle of the housing unit. So every housing unit is only 5 meter wide and 25 meters long. This is on the corner of Amagerbrogade, which is getting to be more and more the center of Copenhagen, and most of the housing out here is very monochrome, you could say, or the functions are almost the same. It's 2 and 3 room apartments. So to add a family housing with a courtyard is a different typology, and the municipality really favored that. Nighttime, and as you can see, the supermarket in the bottom is taking all space, mainly all of the space. And we also needed to, you have a lot of interest, you could say, when you do a mixed use, because if you have a supermarket, you have transportation, you have big trucks coming in the morning and in the afternoon, loading off goods, and you need to pick up the garbage. You need to have storage space for the garbage, you need to have parking places, and so forth, which is somehow crashing with the interest of the sports hall that wanted to be right on street level and wanted to be inviting and ensuring that everybody was able to attend this sports hall. And then of course the housing has a totally different interest, and you cannot mix the entrance of the housing and the sports hall and so forth. So the idea was to ensure that the supermarket had the corner that it needed towards Amagerbrogade, and to also ensure that they did not close off the shop too much. So half of the facade is open with glass and so forth, and you can actually, if you put pressure on retail, you can also make them do this. I mean, you don't need to have an enclosed supermarket to be able to exhibit your goods, and if you have the demands of open glass facades, you will manage somehow. So I think the whole discussion of mixed use is also a political discussion. There needs to be some demands on the different stakeholders in a mixed use project that you need to put on. Otherwise, everybody would do whatever's best for them. Yeah, nighttime. So the sports hall has a need of daylight, but not the very contrasting daylight that you can see. For example, in Arne Jacobsen's sports hall in Landskrona, you have a very big contrast between daylight and walls that are not daylit. Since you have this bowl, you could almost say, and then you have the daylight, you have a very big contrast. So the idea here was to make a sports hall with daylight, but without contrast, without the contrasting blinding that you can get if you have a very dark surface and a very light surface. So these actually let in light. There's slits in the facade, and they're letting in light, but you cannot see the windows from the inside because it's diffused along these walls. So when you're standing, you can see later on when I show the inside of the sports hall. And this is of course paid by the municipality, so the budget is really, really low. This is private retail, and this is private housing owners that are sold off one by one. To ensure that the sports hall was on the first floor, we made this whole facade in the end with a very low staircase where you can actually rest, or you can wait for your friends, but you're certainly exposed towards the street, and you can enter in a natural way instead of going up in an enclosed staircase. So deliberately we use quite a lot of space in entering the street or spilling out into the street and making the sports hall accessible for everybody. On top of the sports hall, or not on top, but on the side you have a multi-purpose space, which is a dance and yoga and theater room that could have much more daylight, and we have a curtain inside, so if you don't want to be exposed, you can draw that. And at the night time, of course, most is visible from the inside, and you're able to attend if you're passing. So accessing a housing unit from a balcony is considered in Denmark, I think, and mainly also here in Sweden, is not considered to be a really nice way of entering an apartment, because you would have windows towards this entrance row. But since we had so much space in the depth, we could draw back each apartment and make a small front room that was only facing a very small front garden or front terrace, and you could enter by that, and that means that you have privacy, and you don't feel exposed towards your neighbor or people that are entering their apartments. Inside the apartments, we have this courtyard giving daylight into the apartment, and the multi-purpose space, the kitchen, dining, living area is not double height, but has an extra height, so you can actually enter to a small balcony on top of the kitchen, and then you have an entrance on top of the entrance that you saw right before. Here, so you have balconies on top of these small houses. And of course, being able to, this is a certain special apartment in the end that doesn't, it's not a beam like everybody else, so you can have a cutout here. Otherwise you have an enclosed wall here, but entering on top of the kitchen, going up to the other balcony towards the west, and having the eastern and southern terrace out here as a private terrace. And here you have the balconies on top of the entrance balconies or entrance areas, where you actually have a really nice view over Copenhagen. And this is all about trying to, the apartments are not very big, they're 110 square meters, but it's all about making use of whatever is there. So if you have a roof, you can also have a terrace. Here's the view from from the spaces that are facing towards the street. And this one is of course also special because it's on the corner and you have this amazing view all down Amagerbrogade. But this is the what do you call them, bay windows that are sort of on top of the sports hall that you can see, and which is also making the typology of housing. Yeah, it's up here. By turning them a little bit, you have a different view, of course. You don't turn towards the neighbor and you don't have this feeling of being very enclosed, but you have a longer and more freer view down the street. And you can see here the sports hall, how the windows are set here in between the and inside quite sort of basic sports hall with flooring and ceiling and so forth, being pretty basic since the budget was not so large. And here you have the daylight, which is not contrasting towards the white walls, since they're lit from behind in a way. So you have a very sort of natural light inside the sports hall. A small sitting stair leading to the dance hall on top of the entrance area. Yeah. So by shaping these, we have the daylight in reflected by these from two sides. These kind of stairs we use a lot because there's sort of they can be used for everything. You can sit here and you can watch your peers play, but you can also use it as a wardrobe, and they certainly are used as that. So it's kind of since you need to get up to the second floor, you can just as well use it as a breakout space. And here's the view from the multi-purpose space, very open and very transparent. So this is IKEA Copenhagen. It's called Viking IKEA by the politicians in Copenhagen. It's everybody, yeah, you know IKEA by anybody. And IKEA has a very sort of strong brand, which means that you would always need to be able to recognize an IKEA from a distance. And you see these big blue boxes and the yellow letters, and everybody knows this is an IKEA. So when IKEA is starting now to move into the cities instead of being outside in the outskirts, and that's a totally different situation. You don't have this sort of highway speed where you just pass by and you see your IKEA. You ride in the city center, and you somehow need to think very differently when you make a large volume like this with a very strong brand, but inside an old city. And IKEA had already done one city IKEA in Hamburg, right on a pedestrian street, and this is the second IKEA that they are doing in the world, city IKEA. It's just as large as all the other IKEAs, which is 38,000 square meters, quite a big box. And IKEA has this system that is really tested how you move through and how everything inside should be to be working as well as possible. But since this site is right by the harborfront in Copenhagen, you have the old fortification and the old city center right here. And you have Kalvebod on the other side. And you have, Kalvebod here, and you have Bryggen on the other side, Islandsbrygge. It's really a center area. Yeah. Also, the whole traffic situation. The way you come into Copenhagen, if you're on the highways, which is out here, it's kind of right where you enter the city center of Copenhagen, and you take your speed down, and you and the traffic is getting really, really, really dense. So the initial plan from IKEA was to to place this big blue box on the site. The site is not all that big. This is Cykelslangen, which is a biking route, a very important biking route going across the harbor and going all the way into Vesterbro, which is part of the bridges in Copenhagen, and you have the site right here. Right here, you already have some hotels, and you have the archive, the National Archive, and you have the SEB Bank, which already kind of started off an inner park, which was part of a former detailed plan or local plan, and where they are right now is here, and you have this bridge which is sort of just standing there, and then you have this big open site. You have a railroad leading into Copenhagen to the main station right in here, and you have a small station, Dybelsbro, right here. Then you have Fisketål, which is a big shopping mall in Copenhagen. And instead of trying to break it down or trying to some sort of mask it with something that looked like a smaller scale, we suggested instead to let IKEA be IKEA towards Kalvebod Brygge and towards the railroad, which is a big barrier in Copenhagen anyway, and then continue this movement from inside the buildings and make a really gigantic rooftop park in Copenhagen, leading all the way down here and out to the south harbor of Copenhagen. So by doing that, you can actually you sort of give back the harbor to the Copenhageners, because right now you have all these hotels and private buildings, mainly offices and hotels towards the harbor front, and you actually don't have really an access to this harbor front. And you can walk out here if you want to, but there's not that many people. But by making this park even higher, you can actually walk up here and you have the full view of the harbor front. So as you can see, the buildings here is also not really buildings that are giving much life into the area. It's a hotel, it's an archive, and it's a bank, and you will get another very big office building on the other side of the bridge. You have a bridge going straight into Vesterbro underneath here, and going straight to Cykelslangen, the biking snake that crosses the harbor. So it's really sort of dense traffic area here. Everybody's crossing in different layers. So what we suggested was that by making this crossing a new modern cityscape, it's not like the inner city Copenhagen, sort of more like the center of Copenhagen has these really small and very cozy, very nice city spaces or urban spaces. This is going to be larger and more. It's more dynamic. You have lots of people crossing by bikes. You have cars. You have lots of things happening here. So it's a larger and more not a sentimental space, you could say, but it's a city. It's an open space, and this is the space where you enter IKEA on the top floor, and then you have another entrance for cars on the bottom floor. And we think that this is going to be where the Copenhageners is going by bike to pick up some of their stuff, and they can rent, or they can for free have transportation bikes and bringing their stuff back. So there's made parking spaces for 800 bikes and a lot of transportation bikes and only 400 cars. So it's an opposite situation than you would have in another IKEA. So it's pretty difficult to understand the different layers here, but what we also worked a lot with IKEA on was to try to, when you go to IKEA, you would enter and then you would do whatever you need to do, and the restaurant would be inside, and the children's playroom and so forth. But trying to open up and make the restaurant be outgoing in a way, to be part of the roofscape or the park area on top, so you can actually sit outside here in the summertime and eat your meatballs, and that the small cafe with soft ice and sausages and so forth is directed towards the urban space inside here. So the entrance areas is that you're on the level of the harbourfront, you could say. You can enter by car, and the level of the bridge, which is already there, you enter by bike or you walk, which is also a different way of structuring an IKEA, where usually you would have just one entrance and one exit. And then, of course, lifting up the park area and having the big IKEA volume underneath here is the major major idea. The way we structured the park was that you should be able to use your bike. You have to do that in Copenhagen, but it's not a biking route. It's not we have super bike routes in Copenhagen, which is really dangerous to walk on because everybody is pretty aggressive on their bikes, and so we wanted this to be more a friendly, calm place to go. But it's there's two routes on top of the park. One is just sort of more, you can use your bike there, and then there's all these different smaller routes that will go into different areas and different activities and so forth. Yeah. Yeah. I won't talk about that. So this is the plan for the park, which is the most important one. And down here we are making 2 hotels. Since IKEA is pretty high, we need to go from 8 meters up to 20 meters with the park. So the half of the park is one big slope, and placing these 2 hotel units with 1,200 rooms, which is a pretty big hotel. And at the same time ensure that you have daylight for all the rooms. It's also quite a thing to do, because of course you don't want to build a hotel that digs down into an artificial mountain and you can't use the spaces underneath. So what we work with cutting out in the ramp or in the mountain, you could say. So every time you move upwards, you would also cut down, and by doing that you have different levels of green courtyards belonging to the hotel. So you would move here along this ramp and ramping up to the top of the park, which is mainly flat here, and then you ramp down again to the other side. And the idea is to use natural sort of natural plants and biology to be sure that we will actually have a park here in 10 years that is growing and is working. So we do not use any foreign plants or any biology that's difficult to maintain in this area. So it's most of the planting has been taken from open fields, from læhegn and stuff like that. So you will have this kind of very natural planting culture on top of this, also to ensure that the wind is not going to be worrying. And so we have all these green areas are plants that has lots of branches, so you would stop the wind. And actually by doing that on both sides, we're able to create an environment that is pretty calm and nice in the middle here. And then of course different themes and different ways of planting and grasses and so forth, but with a natural theme as on top. This is a big hole cut into the park, going down into this urban space that we talked about, where you enter IKEA. So you actually, the bridge is perforated by this big hole, and you walk on each side, or you enter down into the to the main plaza in front of IKEA with a biking elevator, which is big enough for bikes and transportation bikes and so forth. And you can go all the way down to Dybelsbro, which is where the public station is. And our section is quite small, as you can see. But this is Kalvebod Brygge, which is the main route from Copenhageners into Copenhagen. Pretty a lot of heavy traffic, and sort of high speed area. And this is the shopping, big shopping mall that's existing. You have the harbor here, and then you have the bridge connecting Vesterbro to Kalvebod Brygge, and you have IKEA and the park here in between. And down here now, Big is doing 2 towers of youth housing in one end of the full master plan, and we are doing this hotel in the other end, and then you have the existing hotels and so forth. Yeah, and this is of course not all that interesting. It's the way IKEA is structured inside. There are different layers of heights that needs to be packed, you could say, with storage space and so forth. And as you can see, actually, it's pretty dense. Actually, you have a hotel with daylight coming from these pretty small courtyards. So it's all about also working a little bit against what we usually think that we need. Sometimes you would have to compromise in a way on the thinking of daylight and so forth when you make this kind of density. But then, of course, you need to supply with something else, to ensure that the rooms and the outdoor areas is interesting enough. Section through Dybelsbro, here you have the cars and bikes and so forth coming through, going down to Cykelslang and to the harbor. And here down here you have the heavy traffic, and there's an existing ramp up to the bridge here, and you have the 2 entrances, and you have the train stop further down here. So it's really a hub. IKEA, blue and yellow, but it's not the whole building that is blue and yellow. It's only just around the corner and at the entrance place. And of course you have the park here on top. And right now the bridge is a kind of strange construction. We have the cars here, and you have the bikes and the walking pedestrian line here, and we are collecting that together to be able to make a much more relaxed, you could say, plaza space or urban space here. And of course, creating these pockets for the entrances, also for the other end, for the youth housing here, and for the IKEA here, is also about creating shelter from the wind, which is pretty harsh by the harbor. So this is really studied quite thoroughly with the in wind tunnel and so forth. This part of the plaza is all about bikes. In Copenhagen, there's a really huge problem that bikes will kind of make a barrier between wherever you want to go, and you have this big pile of bikes in front. And they actually make a sort of visual barrier. A lot of places, of course, we like bikes. We want to have them close by, and but what we do here is we make a forest of pillars that would visually, in a way, overpower the feeling of the masses of bikes that are supposed to be parked with the pillars. So you have a visually stronger idea here, and then the bikes are all kind of parked in this forest of pillars. Outdoor serving area and so forth, and there's soft ice and sausages, coffee and so forth. And the entrance to IKEA, this is the parking area for transportation bikes. To be sure that we could get the transportation bikes sort of in a smooth way, we made this large ramp, which is also a bike parking ramp. So when you enter here, you can't find a parking space either side. You can walk down with your bikes, or you can drive down with your bike, and you find the first parking space you can find on your way down. This is also connecting from the train station, which is out here in this side, and from the street level. So you have the two elevators taking bikes, and this ramp. Then, of course, the whole discussion of how do you make a facade of this really, really large building and this large, long facade, and you cannot really break it down into tiny, tiny pieces, because in a way you will upscale it. I mean, there's a discussion of scale here where that I think is really important when you try to break large pieces down into another typology, like housing typology with small windows or smaller sort of detailed parts of the facade. You will actually upscale it, because you will have a repetition, you will have or otherwise you'll just have a kind of a messy, very, very large facade. So what we tried to do was to upscale, in a way, the ideas of the facade. So every time you do something, you do it in a larger scale. We also did that in IKEA Global Meeting Center out here in Hupult, out in Hylje, by upscaling the windows. Instead of having lots of smaller windows, by having a few very large windows, you see the building as being smaller. So this is also the idea here, is to upscale everything, and this is the idea here, is to have one big curtain, like a curtain that is, of course, has a permanent character, but with different, very sort of large waves. It will make a really, really soft facade, and you could in the bottom here, all along the facade, you can sit, or different things can happen in this sort of bed that you put the whole building on. So the materials are changing a little bit from transparent with the window areas and to non-transparent here, and then of course with a semi-transparent curtain. So you have these layers of curtains that you draw, and you can see in the nighttime what's going on inside. So this is semi-transparent. It's a little bit difficult to see, but it is. And then you see and look into the activities. This will be open until 10 o'clock in the evening, so it's actually a really active area. And this is renders, nighttime renders from Dybølsbro, which is existing right now, to the front plaza and to along the facade. And you have the hotel further down here. And seen from the harbour front, entering into the plaza, and with the elevator shaft here and the ramps and so forth, and the openings towards the street. And a little bit romantic winter thing from the plaza, where you have the entrance areas, of course, and selling of Christmas trees. And this is the full plan as it is now, with the 1,200 hotel rooms, which is a kind of low-budget hotel, and the ramp coming up along here, and with IKEA underneath, and you have the restaurant here, and you have some of the smaller houses here, also for Technique and so forth, and your youth housing down here, and you have the office buildings that are actually getting built now. It's not part of our plan, and the southern harbour further out. Yeah, of course, the full idea of making this space really green on the roof is important, but also making a street, an urban street that is really a space and not moving along a facade which is really long. So instead of concentrating on making the facade green, that you could move along a green facade, we concentrated on getting trees planted, so you have a space in between the facade and the street, Pretty simple thing, but everybody who's been into Barcelona or any other kind of southern urban space knows how much it means that you have wide boardwalks or pedestrian streets with trees, and then you don't mind the traffic on the other side. Okay, so this is a very small scale project. I'm only showing this because we talked about it with this Swedish Wood Prize, and it's actually a pretty old project that we started doing 2004, I think, and we were opening it a few years ago, and now actually it's getting a lot of prizes. It's a slow mover, but I guess you could, if you're really thinking about it, you could talk about densification here, but it's not really a densification project. But the very unique situation here is in Rå, which is this old fishing village. And as you could see, really, really small scale. And you have this open, wonderful beach, which is preserved. You have one school from the beginning of the century, or the beginning of the 19th century, which is right on the beach, which is also a very unique situation. And there was this possibility of building in front of the school, which is also very unique. You have all these protection lines, and the beach is really, really protected. But there was an old site here, so they were actually allowed to build a pre-school on this site. When you look at Rå and look at the city structure you have here, is very much about, it's very pragmatic in the way that you create a space that is protected for the wind. You have all these small huts and houses, and they will all kind of turn their back against the wind, and they will create small spaces in between that is wind protected. And the scale is really, really tiny. So the idea here was, since we are on this beautiful landscape and we were relating in a way to this old fishing village, to merge the two, to merge the structure of the housing and the landscape in a simple way. So mainly the house is constructed by 4 wooden constructions that are also acting as shelves and sort of protective areas, and then you have everything in between, also in wooden construction, but that this is the load-bearing things. This is the houses of the city, and then you have the landscape that it's merged with. So it's kind of put down into the landscape. And this is the situation plan. Looks strange. Something with a solution, I think. But here's the old existing school that is actually listed now, and the connection with the preschool out here, and then of course you have the water out here. And what actually happened when you spend so much time from the first sketch and you start the building site is that things are changing, and the rules and the knowledge that we have of the world is also changing. So when we did the sketches and were putting in for the municipality and so forth to get it, and it was overclocked and all this long process for the detailed plan. We had a 2.5 meter limit for where to build the floor of the house, considering, of course, the flood that can be created from the climate change. And when we actually started to build, that limit had risen to 3 meters. So the limit of the height of the house was one thing that was accepted in the local plan, but then we had to actually make the house 0.5 meter lower because we had to lift it up 0.5 meter. That also meant that we really had to be careful that this would feel like part of the landscape, since it's on the beach and it's not 3 meter high. We didn't want it to be lifted up, so we had to move some of the landscape to make it look natural afterwards. And also we had a lot of problems in the building period, getting everything done, you could say, within a limit that was actually too low. And this is the main idea, is that every group has their own house or workshop, atelier, and then there's you spill out to some of the in-between spaces, which is also, some of it is common space and some of it is more private. So the children would enter in a common wardrobe and have their clothes and stuff and change, and then you move into this dense city structure into your own little house. And this is how it looks like today. The initial idea in 2004 was actually that we should move on top of the roof, and that we should give something back to the neighborhood, since we actually taking this beautiful beach area. We should give something else back. So the idea was that you could walk on top of the roof and you could actually see the morning sun and the evening sun from the top. But there were worries about safety and insurance and so forth. And so right now there's only these seatings in each end for the children to use. The house is a wooden construction because we wanted this to be as natural as possible. It could also be concrete, but to have this grayish color like the sand or the landscape around it. As you can see here, we pushed up the landscape since the house is pretty high compared to this area. So make it look like a part of a little hill, and this is going to be taken away when the landscape is fully restored, you could say. And this it's really close to the beach. This is the beach line. You have the water right out here. And sort of abstract in a way, but still you can see the small houses, and this is an in-between landscape. The cladding is very sustainable wood sort. It's a rubinia. It's grown in kind of quite tiny trees, you could say. It's as hard as hardwood as teak and these really sort of expensive and also a little bit dodgy wood sorts. But it's grown in a very sustainable way. And the only problem here is that you cannot make them into big pieces because the trees are pretty small. So what you have to do when you use it is to use it in pretty small sticks. Otherwise, they will twist. But then they are extremely hard, and you don't have to do anything to maintain them for at least 30 years, and they become gray and nice. And also by lifting up you could say the playgrounds are not the most beautiful things in the world, to be honest. Playgrounds are always a little bit, messy, and so by lifting up the landscape up here, this is like a retaining wall. You have the landscape going all the way to this wall, and we could sink down the playground for the children, so when you walk on the beach, you don't see the playground. It's not disturbing your eye. Yeah. Also creating these pockets in between the house, of course, and the wind is important because the wind is always coming from the west, and it's pretty windy there. Yeah, entrance. Of course, this is not. Don't think that you can make a roof of wood. You can't. This is it's just a cladding. Underneath we have the real roof, and you can actually, as you can see, you can take up parts of this, so you can clean the ducts and so forth. Yeah. And wonderful view of Denmark. Actually, I think there was a mistake in not wanting to have people to walk on the roof because every time I'm there are kids on the roof with skateboards. Yeah, so it's pretty dangerous. But so I mean, of course, you can get up there if you want to. But anyway. And then what we don't have, that you have on this side of the Sund, is sunset. So this is not something, it's not a Photoshop thing, it's real. Yeah. Inside, before they moved in, looks very tidy and a little bit too clean, I think. But this is, as you see, the load-bearing furniture or construction that you have here, with this big roof light that you get the top lit room here, and then you can store all your stuff here, and then you really always have a lot of stuff when you have a kindergarten. There's lots of work and stuff to be stored. Yeah. Yeah. Use of space. Also, all the in-between spaces are kind of used for different things. So being sure that every square meter is kind of used for something and not being just a hallway, I think, is important. Yeah. Thank you.